Hi everyone, welcome to Kings and Queens Chess Academy's YouTube channel. I'm Grandmaster Magesh Panchanathan, and today we'll be studying Paul Morphy's miniature games. So we have a series in which we've been studying some games of Paul Morphy, one of my favorite players. He has fantastic timing, coordination, and all the basics that are required for a young and upcoming chess player to study and learn. So we use Paul Morphy for a lot of our classes and for a lot of our emphasis on teaching these basic concepts. So today we're going to look at a couple of miniatures, meaning the games were really quick, probably less than 15 minutes. And I'm not looking at specifically checkmate. These are games in which Paul Morphy's opponent is resigned. So that's completely fine. But I just want to emphasize one point in the two games that we're going to see today on how Morphy used his pieces in a nice way. So he developed and they were coordinated. So this is the main takeaway I want you to keep in mind before we start the game. So keep an eye on how Morphy is using all his pieces. And that's usually a key in finishing off a game. Of course, some games end up quickly because someone made a blunder. And pretty much all games that end up quickly have some kind of huge mistake from their opponent. But these two games have this specific theme. All right, let's jump into the game. The first game, Paul Morphy is playing white, and this was played in the year 1857. And the opening was the French defense. And I'm not sure if players really understood the meaning of all these openings, but this is what happened in this game. So again, Morphy always sticks to basics. Two pawns in the center, very simple. Black tries to break the center, and Morphy decides to advance. For example, the capture was possible, knight to f3 was possible. These are all very much reasonable and playable moves. Morphy decides to keep a little bit extra space and plays d5. And black probably makes the first slight error of playing the pawn again to e5, which means black has now played two moves with that pawn. Usually you don't move the same piece twice in the beginning of the game because that gives your opponent more time to develop their pieces and launch an attack. And at this point, you could play a lot of normal moves. Knight f3, for example, is normal. Knight to c3 is normal. I mean, you can develop the bishops, lots of normal moves. But Morphy doesn't waste much time. He goes in for the kill right away, f4. Now, I would be very careful about moving that pawn. If you're a beginner, if you're starting chess and you're learning these games, just be a little careful about moving that pawn. They're very nice and aggressive ideas with f4, but you also always expose your king to this diagonal, right? And you need to know exactly how to deal with any trouble that might come in this diagonal. For example, in this case, queen to h4 check is not really a big deal because you could just always block with g3. But you need to keep an eye on that kind of a check to make sure that you're okay. All right, moving on. Black plays d6, very normal, defending the pawn. And knight to f3. Simple developing move, but attacking the pawn. It's a tempo, small tempo, right? Black plays bishop to g4, pinning the knight and saying, you know what? You cannot take the pawn because the knight's actually in a pin. Pawn captures, bishop captures. So we've seen this several times. Black could also go pawn captures because knight will not be able to capture on e5 because of bishop to d1. But black wants to be safe here and simply says bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, and then takes. So it's about 7 moves into the game and nothing special has happened so far. White does have a very strong pawn. You can probably acknowledge that. But from here on, how the game ends is probably pretty impressive. Morphy plays very, very quick, aggressive developing moves. And suddenly, from nowhere, his attack becomes too strong. So let's see what happens. Bishop b5 check. The bishop is getting out. And also exploiting the fact that black doesn't have a bishop to block. Yeah. So he has to block with the knight, putting himself on a pin. The knight is developed to c3. 2 pieces are out. Knight goes to f6. And the third piece out. So before you know it, we have 3 very active pieces. Of course, the queen also became active because black almost forced the white queen to come out with bishop takes f3. So again, nothing much happened, but white's pieces are in great place. This is how important development is, center control is, right? If you just bring your pieces out and put them in good spaces, good things will happen, right? Let's see what happens. Bishop to e7. So at this point, most of the pieces are developed except for the rook, and Morphy puts in a nice finishing touch with d6. Strong moves can be played, sacrifices can be played when your pieces are ready. And that's exactly what happens here. Morphy gives up the free pawn, and you might be like, what is going on? Well, what it does, it actually opens up another line on this queen, which leaves one more piece to come into the game. Simple but very elegant long castle. King is safe. Yes. Sorry, let's do it with the green color. The rook is also in an awesome position right now, right? So at this point, actually black resigned. And I can see why. Because this is unbelievable amount of pressure that's coming along from every side. So this is just way too much. I'm going to show you some example moves really quick to see what would have happened if black continued, right? So let's say black played queen to e7. Knight to d5 would be an awesome follow-up because this knight's pinned, right? Followed by, at some point, I get rid of this knight, and then there will be still more pressure on this thing, right? There is also a very interesting idea to just take this bishop and sacrifice your rook, but you follow up with the next rook. And when the queen moves, now everything goes crashing. Multiple pins, I'll simply take this one, and whatever you take back, you lose this one. So queen e7 doesn't work. If the bishop were to move back, I would just simply lose this one because after bishop takes, I simply go rook takes d7, and your queen is too valuable for you to give that up, right? So very quickly, the game went from okay to lost, right? In about 5 moves. And how did that happen? 1, 2, 3, 4 extremely active pieces, and the 5th one is ready. This is also kind of ready, right? Keep an eye for this one in Paul Morphy games. Extremely strong coordination of pieces. Let's move on to the next one. Let's see. There it is. All right. In this one, Paul Morphy was playing black. And let's see what happens. In this case, he uses French defense, d5 and e5. So this is usually a very common French defense structure. And white gets these two very strong pawns in the center and more space. But black usually breaks the center with c5, which is what Morphy does. And white protects the center, and we continue development. And another very strong move, we talked about this in the last game. You can definitely move the f pawn up. It does protect your center, but just keep an eye on how your king is exposed. So in this case, Morphy's opponent is playing f4, but queen to h4 check will be met with just g3. So it's not a real problem, right? So queen b6 was played, putting a lot of pressure on this one. And white defends that. And the last development on the queen side. So for a change, black has developed all the queen side pieces right now. And the king side pieces are yet to be out. But it's going to happen soon. Pawn to a3. And the next move, again, I like the coordination of pieces. Knight to h6. It looks like a really bad move. Why would Morphy put his knight on the edge of the board? Well, the knight is heading towards the center. And not only that, this is a perfect example of coordination of how all black's pieces are focusing on one weak spot where he wants to put pressure, right? All about coordination. This knight's going to attack, the queen is going to attack, all of these pieces are looking at that particular square. b4 was played, capture, and knight f5. Sorry, actually rook c8 was played. Makes a lot of sense. I'm getting my rook ready in the open file. Bishop b2 and knight f5. So at this point, pretty much all black pieces are developed. The bishop needs to come out and castling needs to happen. That's it. Everything else is set, yeah? Black could play that and white could have played regular moves like bishop e2 and the game would have continued the normal way. Except here, white chose a strange move, queen to d3, which is not a good idea. And you will see why. And you will see how quickly, again, game goes from, oh, normal position to game over, right? When your pieces are ready, that's what happens. Morphy starts with a beautiful sacrifice. Bishop captures b4 check. Looks like a bad move. You're about to lose a piece, right? Nope, it's not so bad because the next follow-up is knight captures d5, immediately gaining a tempo. And tempo is the most important part of the finishing touch. If you want to finish the game off and all your pieces are ready, why is tempo important? Because you don't want to give time to your opponent to regroup and get ready, right? So watch what happens. The queen has to go back and then send the rook in. Knight to c2 check was possible and you could have gone for the rook. But no, Morphy wants the best. Rook to c2. Going after the queen, going after the bishop. Queen goes back to d1. And now pretty much every move is winning for black, I guess. but he goes after the best. He plays knight to e3, going after the queen. And white actually just resigned here. Understandably, the bishop is hanging, the queen is trapped, has nowhere to go, and the king is almost pretty much done too, because think about this. This knight, if this knight can get in, or if this queen can at some point get in for a check, everything is just kind of lingering around the king, and it's about to be over soon. Particularly once the queen falls, it'll all be over. So two miniature games, both games ending less than 15 moves, and of course it ended because their opponent, Morphy's opponent, resigned. But the common theme I want you to keep in mind is if you want to give that swift and quick blow to your opponent, it is really necessary that you have your pieces ready, right? Morphy had all his pieces ready, and boom, he went for the kill. All right, hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you.